Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here. You're listening to the Aravosis Report. Maybe you're even watching. Oh, wow. End of the week. We are here to talk about Ukraine, the latest news from the war in the last 24 hours. Not as big of a news day, I'd say, for the first time in a very long time, but that's fine because it'll give us more time for Q&A and everything else. Although there's several important topics today we will get into. Maybe, as always, introduce yourselves and just stay where you are from. And I will wait a second to turn on the TikTok folks since they come zooming in fast and furious. Oh, man. And I've still got a little bit of a migraine. Wow. My first migraine in a very long time that I got from going to the doctor's office on Wednesday. And it's not fully gone away. I'm like, now I know what people with migraines feel like. It's like, woo, this is crazy. Thank God I don't get these things normally because, oh my gosh. It's like, oh, anyway. You're kind of like groggy and headachy and everything at the same time. Anywho, but anyway, yes. So we've got a show. I'm relatively dimmed in my kitchen, so I'll be fine. I will start TikTok right now on my iPad right over here. All right. And we'll mirror the video so my map is correct. There we go. All right. We'll wait for the TikTokers. Ooh, there we go. Up. First TikToker is a name I can't pronounce. HJJHHHE something. And everybody else on TikTok, welcome, guys. I'm John Aravosis. We'll wait a second for the TikTokers to join us. It usually only takes them 30 seconds to a minute to fly in mass like flying monkeys. Good flying monkeys, however. Oh, man. Anyway, yeah, so I was just saying I've got a relatively short show tonight, but that's okay, because that will give us more time for questions, because the last couple nights we've been eating into the questions a little bit, which I haven't meant to be doing. So hello, everybody on TikTok, YouTubers. The YouTubers are just in the process of introducing themselves. If you folks on TikTok, one of the things we did early on, which I still kind of like, is maybe just say where you're from, if you feel comfortable saying so. But I think it's neat for people to see where everybody else is hailing from. So if you can do that, that'd be pretty cool. And we're almost there on TikTok. I always wait till we get maybe there we go, 750 people. Now I'll start the intro. Okay, so just to remind folks, I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and the news of the last 24 hours, using my background in foreign policy to hopefully help inform you on what's been happening in the war and why it matters. What we typically do, thank you, Carrie, for the gift already. I will talk for today, maybe about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, giving you the news, and then we'll switch into question and answer, discussion. You guys can ask questions. You can also just give me your idea on what's going on, because I think that's really interesting as well. So on TikTok, you can submit your questions, and you can even do it now. I won't get to questions for a bit, but submit the questions now. Go to the profile on TikTok, my profile, and you'll see the Q&A link. Click, thank you, Big Hawk, for the hat. Click the Q&A link and give me your question. The rest of you give the questions at the bottom of the screen, and in perfect timing for somebody giving a gift on TikTok. I am independent media. I'm doing this on my own, and no one is supporting me except you guys. So I appreciate your gifts. Your gifts help keep me going. Please keep them coming, the gifts on TikTok, and I will try to do a shout out when I see them. And your super chat and super whatever the heck they're called. Oh, or as NATObot just did with the very generous whale. We accept the whales as well on TikTok. Thank you for that. Oh, and the wave. Thank you, NATObot. That was very nice of you. All right, guys. Let me dive right in with the news here. So several kind of weird, interesting stories that popped up at the last minute here, which I just found kind of interesting. President Zelensky said that Russia was seeking a short truce with Ukraine, a proposal he fiercely rejected because it would simply allow Moscow's forces to regroup. Now, nobody knows what Zelensky's talking about here. We assume he's telling the truth because Zelensky has a record of telling the truth here versus the Russians. This fits in with what we were hearing the last several days. Remember, Zelensky said a couple days ago that he was hearing word from, thank you, Girth, with the pause. He was hearing word from Western allies that the Russians wanted to talk, right? Thank you, Addie. And especially something like this, a short truce. The problem with this is And thank you, Ali, for that. The problem with this is that the Russians, and we're going to be discussing this in a minute, the Russians are already digging in quite significantly, setting up their defensive lines, setting up these things they're calling dragon's teeth, because they're like these triangular like three-dimensional triangular cement blocks that are meant to stop tanks from getting through, and they look like, the teeth of dragons. And the Russians are really digging in to stop any further advances from the Ukrainians, because clearly the Russians are now on the defensive. The Ukrainians are on the offensive recently. And a truce of any kind would simply help the Russians dig in. I compare this to you being in let's say you're in a marathon race with somebody, even a sprint, and you're halfway through the race. You're tired, but the other guy is exhausted, okay? And you're catching up on the other guy, or you're maybe even a little ahead of him. But bottom line is, you've still got some spirit in you, your morale's high, and the other runner is just exhausted and freaking out. Well, what do you think happens if the judges say, you know what? Let's have a timeout for a month and we'll come back to the race exactly where we were in a month. Well, in a month, both racers are going to be, right? They're going to feel better. They're going to have rested. They'll both be starting at an equal point. The morale will be up. That's what happens when you have a truce at this point in the war, where Ukraine has great morale. Russia's morale is in the toilet. Ukraine is on the offensive. They're moving ahead. It's more slowly than it was in the last couple of months, but Ukraine, as we just saw just last week, Ukraine took back the strategic town of Kherson, which is a Ukrainian town that the Russians had captured early on in the war. The Russians are losing. Thank you, Hills. They're losing slowly, but they're losing. It only benefits the Russians to have even a short truce of a week or 2 weeks. It lets the Russians rest and catch up to where the Ukrainians are, and then start fighting again. So Zelensky is right in terms of rejecting any kind of a truce of any kind, a short truce with the Russians. Now, along those lines, there was a poll. I'm not sure how recent, but it was quoted today by somebody with PBS's NewsHour, which is thank you, El, which is one of the major public broadcasting news station here in the States that's very credible. He said that 91% of Ukrainians think the war should end only once Crimea is liberated. Now, let me show you where Crimea is on my handy dandy t-shirt map. It's a t-shirt, but I love this map because it is the best map I found to show you Ukraine. And the best part is it's also high contrast. So Crimea is this peninsula in the south. This is a portion of Ukraine that the Russians invaded and stole in 2014. I always like to make this point that a lot of people don't realize the war did not start in February of this year, February 24th, when the Russians invaded. The war started all the way back in 2014 when the Russians invaded the first time and stole this part of Ukraine, and also pretty much stole 2 portions in the east. Okay, so that's what's important to remember. So Crimea, what the Ukrainians are saying is they are not willing to have peace with Russia until they get all of their territory back. By the way, all of the territory, including Crimea, but also the territory the Russians took this time around, which is basically this swath of land, okay? And the Ukrainians are getting it back slowly. They're getting more land back in the east. They just got a big chunk right around here in northern Kherson province. The capital city of Kherson province is also Kherson. So you'll hear that the Russians abandoned and evacuated Kherson. They were talking about the city, which is right up here, not the entire province of Kherson, which is here. But the Russians have gone from controlling over almost 100% of Kherson to now only controlling 70% of Kherson. It's good. It's movement forward. Now, let's keep going. Russia. Oh, this was good news too, actually. Oh, thank you, Didike, for the meteor shower there. This was potentially good news about Brittany Griner. The problem is, thank you, Lima and Heidi, or HVD. I'm saying Heidi. Potentially good news about Brittany Griner, but maybe not. Russia says today, the problem is the Americans poo-pooed it. So it's kind of weird what's going on with this story. Brittany Griner, you may recall, is the American female basketball star who was arrested on drug charges in Ukraine right before the war. Whether she's guilty or not, we really don't know. She ended up confessing, but you've got to realize, thank you, Annie. Annie just did another whale on TikTok. We do the wave. Wave for Annie. Thank you, Annie. That was very, very generous of you. I appreciate that. Brittany was arrested by the Russians, and then she confessed to her crimes. But you've got to recall that she's under arrest in a dictatorship, okay? And she's Black, she's a woman, and she's gay. And at least being Black and gay are frowned upon in Russia. Lots of racism in Russia and super duper lot of homophobia, especially officially sponsored homophobia from the federal government in Russia. So the fact that she confessed might mean she's guilty. It also might mean that she's in real trouble sitting in a Russian penal colony where these people work from 7 a.m. to midnight. Okay. There was a report a few years back on the penal colony that she was sent to. Some of the convicts, thank you, Chaz, were working from 7 a.m. to midnight with no bathroom breaks. Okay. They just had to basically go on themselves. So, the fact that she confessed, Anyway, what Russia claimed today, Russia said they hope to make a prisoner swap soon with Brittany Griner and a convicted Russian arms trafficker named Victor Bout, whose nom de guerre is the Merchant of Death. The U.S. responded by saying that the Russians weren't negotiating seriously or really at all on the issue. The U.S. says that they have repeatedly put proposals out there, and the Russians have not really responded through official channels or anywhere else. And what I'm hearing here, because it's weird, some of the news reports simply mentioned the Russian proposal, and they made it sound like, wow, the Russians made a proposal. This is great. The fact that the U.S. is going, give me a break, means that the Russians are throwing this out there, it looks like, just for propaganda reasons. They're not throwing it out there as a serious proposal to advance some kind of hostage exchange. They're actually doing it just for their own propaganda. So thank you, Ellen. So just keep that in mind. Let's hope it's good news for Brittany, but I'm not convinced. Sweden confirmed today, Sweden is doing an ongoing investigation of the Nord Stream pipeline explosions. You'll recall that earlier this year, now probably 2 months ago, maybe, I'm trying to remember exactly. Thank you, Andrew. The Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines that bring gas to Europe. Nord Stream 1 has been operating for decades. Nord Stream 2 was supposed to start working this year, but the Germans put a freeze on it. The Americans asked the Germans to do it, but the Germans put a freeze on it because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, because these were pipelines bringing natural gas from Russia to Europe. Well, someone blew up both pipelines a few months ago. There's been a lot of investigation going on. The Swedes released some preliminary information today, and the Swedish government said that it is clear that this was a matter of gross sabotage, that it was absolutely an intentional criminal act. And they said that it was clearly 2 detonations, that it was 2 explosions, and they found the residue of explosives. Now, what we still need to see is if we can figure out who did this. Now, everybody thinks it's the Russians. I mean, it's possible it's not the Russians, as we know, just like this issue with the recent missile landing in Poland, right? You want to be careful jumping to conclusions, but let's see. But in any case, it at least now has reached the stage where we know for a fact it was sabotage and it was an explosion. Let me do a quick reset. I am John Aravosis. If you're joining me right now, this is the Aravosis Report. It's my daily show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine and update you guys about what's going on, what matters, and then followed by a question and answer period at the end. The way you guys can help me the most to keep my work going is simply to follow me. Click that subscribe button on YouTube and everywhere else. Click the follow button on TikTok right now. Just go ahead, do it. And that's probably the best way you can help me. The other way, of course, is by keeping those gifts coming on TikTok and elsewhere. I will say I also have a Patreon, which I keep forgetting to mention, but folks have been telling me I should. You can find me over at Patreon. It's patreon.com/Aravosis, my last name. Or you can just type in aravosis.com, which will take you to my whole list of Linktree. Or even for you TikTok folks, which makes it very easy, just go to my profile and click the link in my profile, and that takes you to my Linktree. You can see my Patreon, my YouTube, everything else. But what is actually helpful for the Patreon is if you guys could even commit to subscribing $5 a month, that would help me out a lot. I am doing this full time. I want to keep doing it full time, but my only support I'm getting is from you guys. So thank you for that. And thank you, by the way, for the little streamers that popped up and the cat paws. Both of you, thank you very much. Here's a weird story that popped up yesterday, and some folks were asking me about it. I think actually during this broadcast, people were asking me, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they were like, "What about the dummy warhead?" And I was like, "The dummy nuclear warhead?" Well, according to Sky News, and Sky News, a British news source citing the Ukrainian papers. Now, that doesn't mean it's true, but I'll throw it out here. According to Sky News citing the Ukrainian press, a Russian missile was shot down over Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, and the missile was installed with a nuclear warhead dummy. So not a nuclear warhead, but basically a mock nuclear warhead, okay? The missile, which was apparently shot down yesterday, was originally intended to carry a nuclear payload, but was instead installed with a dummy. Now, the question here becomes, and there's a couple possibilities. One was, did the Russians take out the nuclear warhead and intend to put in a conventional warhead and then totally just do what these Russian military guys seem to do, screw up and not put the conventional warhead in? So in other words, the missile itself would be a dummy missile. It wouldn't cause, other than the missile itself landing on you, which could cause damage like a hunk of metal falling from the sky, it wouldn't actually have explosives in it, okay? So that's one possibility. They just screwed up. Another is whether the Russians did this as some kind of psychological operation, which is my suspicion. The whole point, and I'm sure even for you guys, I'm going to guess that you're probably going to agree with me on this one. Why would the Russians send a warhead, a missile that's usually a nuclear-tipped missile, but this time they send it with a dummy, a fake nuclear device inside? They're doing it to freak the Ukrainians out. They're doing it to tell the Ukrainians, sorry, my allergies are going again. They're doing it to tell the Ukrainians, exactly as a scare tactic, like Rat Attack just said on TikTok, to tell them, this was our nuclear weapon. It could have been nukes this time, but it wasn't. But maybe next time it will be, right? That's what I think they're doing. It's what actually I've mentioned to you guys several times before. I've mentioned how if I were Putin, I would realize that I cannot get away with using nuclear weapons. There is no way that Russia can use nuclear weapons. For the same reason we can't, because once Russia uses it, if we start using it, the world ends. If we use nuclear weapons and Russia responds, the world ends, right? If Russia uses nuclear weapons just against Ukraine and we respond in a conventional way, then it means NATO has entered the war. And if NATO enters the war, thank you, Tina, by the way, if NATO enters the war, Russia loses. A nuclear war, we both lose. A conventional war, we win, right? Russia cannot beat Ukraine. Russia is having a majorly difficult time beating Ukraine. Imagine what Russia's going to do if all of NATO joins the war. Hell, if Poland joined the war, Russia would lose at this point because Russia's just teetering with Ukraine, right? All they need is one more powerful country to join and they're in trouble. 30 NATO countries, Russia doesn't want that. So I don't think the nuclear thing is a real threat. But because they can't actually use the nuclear weapons without getting into real trouble, they need to convince Ukraine and convince us that they might use nuclear weapons, right? Because might use nuclear weapons has an advantage to it. If we start thinking that Russia might use nuclear weapons, we start doing which some people in my country have already been doing. Oh my God, it might go nuclear. Donald Trump said this the other night. It might go nuclear, right? We've got to stop helping Ukraine. Russia wants to be feeding that kind of paranoia, and they can only feed it by scaring people into thinking they're going to go nuclear, but not actually going nuclear, like I said, because if they go nuclear, then we get into the war and Russia loses. So they can't do that. So I think that's what it is. I think it's an effective technique, frankly, because it will freak people out, but I also think it's BS. It's garbage. It's a feint. Russia is expected to move some of the troops now that they had in Kherson. You'll recall at the beginning of the show, I was talking about this region called Kherson and how the Ukrainians, thank you for the hat there, Louis. The Ukrainians forced the Russians out of the northern part of Kherson province, north of the river here, and then the Russians moved south basically and have dug in a lot. Well, in addition to digging in the southern portions of Kherson, the Russians are expected to move a significant, thank you, Sam, move a significant number of their troops into eastern Ukraine, where they are also fighting the Ukrainians. There's a front all along here, more or less, they're fighting to a varying degrees, okay? More or less where my finger is. But the big fighting has been going on here in Kherson and over in the east, well, kind of south and north. I'd say up and down where my finger is here in the east, okay? And what they're thinking is going to happen is that the Russians are going to, I do have Twitter, it's the same last name, Aravosis. That the Russians are going to try to take advantage of the fact that they're moving some of their troops south in Kherson and move some of those troops to the east to Bakhmut is part of it, but it's not just Bakhmut. They're moving over to Bakhmut, which is sort of east and south a little, and then north of Bakhmut, they're also still fighting in this, well, you can't really see it on my map, but it's Svatove, Kremina. There's this area there that's right east of Kupiansk. If you've got a Ukrainian a Ukrainian map in front of you, you will see that area around there, they're fighting, and then they're also fighting further south around Bakhmut. Thank you for, who was that? Dylan. Thank you, Dylan, for the paper cranes. So keep an eye on that. Now, I will say, having read more on just what's going on, it is expected that the war will be slowing down over the coming months because of the winter. It is also expected that it will be slowing down just because the Russians are digging in more. The Russians are actually, good example. Somebody just asked, what do you think about Mariupol? I'm from Mariupol. Well, Mariupol is one of the 3 places where the Russians are digging in a really big way because they seem to be anticipating that the Ukrainians are going to counterattack. So where the Russians are digging in right now, they're digging in along the border with Crimea right here, okay? Now, the Russians occupied pretty much this, more or less this, okay? They're digging in here and they're putting in those dragon's teeth I was telling you about. They're basically like cement, big, huge cement triangles that stop tanks and things. So they're putting them here. They're putting them around Mariupol. Oh, thank you, Dylan. Always love the galaxy there. They're putting them around Mariupol. Mariupol, you'll recall, is the town where the Azov battalion was fighting in the Azovstal steel plant, where 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers held off 14,000 Russian soldiers for 2 months. Mariupol is also the town in which the Russians bombed that maternity hospital. Remember the pregnant mothers that got bombed in their hospital by the Russians? It is also probably most famously the town where the Russians bombed that theater, the drama theater that had the words children written outside of it in Russian. Remember, Jetsi, it had written on top, and the Russians bombed it anyway. All of that is Mariupol. Mariupol has been very sad. So you've got the Russians digging in along this line, digging in around Mariupol, and digging in around here. Basically, actually, I can tell you right here, Severodonetsk, right along the river here at Severodonetsk, which is also on my map. That the military analysts think that means that I am Greek, by the way, not Ukrainian. They think that means that the Russians believe that's where the Ukrainians are coming next. So Crimea, Mariupol, and Severodonetsk. But what's also interesting here, okay, check this out. The Russians are digging in here. They're digging in their defensives here. The only thing is the Russian front line is all the way up here at the river. Why are they digging in all the way back here? Because they're afraid they're going to lose the front line. and that's what the military analysts are saying, is that this is actually an indication that the Russians are afraid they're going to get pushed back. So that's actually a good sign that even the Russians themselves think they're going to have to fall back to here and basically liberate all of Kherson. Mariupol, same thing. The Russian front is more or less where my finger is, okay, going across. Mariupol is way behind the front, but the Russians are digging in here because they think the Ukrainians are going to make a big push and actually get that far, which is good. Now, whether the Ukrainians can get that far, who knows? But again, the fact that the Russians are worried about it is a good sign. Let me see here. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I'll do another quick reset. So I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. If any of you are new here, I do a daily broadcast Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine and then take your questions. You can submit your questions on TikTok via the Q&A box or the Q&A link actually in my profile. The rest of you can do it in the comments there. If you guys could, thank you, Suzanne. If you guys could make sure to follow me, hit that follow button on TikTok, hit the subscribe button on YouTube and everywhere else. That would be really helpful. And I have a Discord. Do check out my Discord as well. We've got a lot of great chats we have there, mostly about politics, but actually about sports and cooking and our pets as well. You can find that at discord.aravosis.com. And please do keep the gifts coming. I really do appreciate them on TikTok. Like I said, next to following me and subscribing, I would say the gifts are really the most important because that's what helps you keep paying the bills. So thank you all for those. A few more news stories. I've got the fortifications we talked about. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said that today that Russia is not ready for peace. This was quoted in Reuters. He said that peace in Ukraine was not going to be possible until Russia withdrew its troops. Listen to this. I am afraid Russia is not ready to withdraw its troops. I'm afraid Russia is not ready to withdraw. And as far as it doesn't withdraw, peace will not be possible. It is Russia who has to make peace possible. The aggressor has to withdraw if he wants a sustainable peace. Now, that's helpful because, there still is that lingering fear as to whether the West at some point may try to push Ukraine into some kind of negotiations or something. So it's important that those who are supporting Ukraine, in this case, the European Union, keep being clear about the fact that we recognize Russia's the aggressor here. And unless Russia wants peace, we're not going to have peace. And that's going to require Russia withdrawing. Thank you for the various gifts there, Bonnie, and who was that? Dylan, and who else am I missing? Lily White. Thank you, guys. And loyalty gets loyalty. What else we got? Okay, this was kind of weird. I'm going to close my last little story here, and then we'll hit the Q&A, the question and answer. I wanted to talk briefly about the electrical outages that Ukraine is having because the Russians keep blowing up the electrical infrastructure in Ukraine with their missiles, right? A little bit of water. Now, this is a little weird because I get kind of mixed stories here. So we were told today that nearly half of Ukraine's energy grid, thank you, Dylan, nearly half of Ukraine's energy grid has been knocked out by the Russian strikes, okay? Thank you, Susie Grace, for those. Rolling blackouts have been happening amongst the various neighborhoods in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, where basically one neighborhood has power for a number of hours, then they turn the power off and move it to another neighborhood so that at least everybody gets power at some point throughout the day. 10 million people were without power earlier this week. There was a news report tonight I saw that said millions were without power again, and that Kyiv again was blacked out. But then I also saw a story today that said that the government said they've restored power everywhere. Now, what I suspect is going on is the Russians have pretty much destroyed half of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, right? So the power plants, the power grids, whatever you call the electrical generators, all this kind of stuff, right? Thank you, Susie, has been destroyed. The Ukrainians have enough excess capacity that they've been able to keep the power on within reason. But we know that isn't totally true, right? I mean, I was talking to my friend Vlad, who's in southwestern Ukraine, and I may have told you guys this yesterday that they were without power for 16 hours there in their town. So hard to say. Now, last little point with this regard, I wanted to say with regards to Europe's energy. Croatia's former president said today that she's not worried about this winter in Europe in terms of Russia having cut off all the energy exports to Europe, things like this, because there's enough supply, enough stockpiles. She's worried about next winter when natural gas stockpiles have been depleted and the temperatures are colder, because Europe has been having, I guess, a warmer winter like us here. It finally got to be winter out here a couple of days ago. Up until now, I had shorts on last week. I mean, it's been crazy here. Just wanted to throw that out there that, as the war goes on longer and longer, it becomes harder to sustain it. But then again, that's a year from now in winter. We can deal with that. Actually, Roshin just reminded me, I did want to make a quick comment before we go into Q. Actually, I'll tell you really quick. Submit your questions on TikTok via the Q&A link in my profile. Questions or comments. If you've got an observation about something we've talked about, your own theory, feel free to put it there. You guys know how to put them here in the comments there. I just wanted to mention we are doing a fundraiser for Ukrainian troops. Thank you for reminding me, Roshin. I launched it last night. We're only going to do it for a couple days. Basically, some Ukrainian soldiers at the front line need a new SUV. Sports utility vehicle. These guys do counter-sabotage work, which basically means it's their job to hunt down and stop the Russians who sneak across the border into Ukraine and then blow things up, whether they're blowing up electrical facilities, whether they're blowing up factories, military headquarters, whatever. These guys' job, which is very dangerous, is to track down basically Russian saboteur units. Now, these happen to be, and the reason we're helping them is for this reason. These guys also happen to be the guys who provide security for Harkovu Mir, which is the charity that we have been helping now almost since the beginning of the war. It's a charity that provides food to people in need in Ukraine. People living in, for example, in Kherson, I was reading today, in Kherson, people that were liberated, the grocery stores have no food, right? I mean, these grocery stores were living under occupation. There's no food. So these guys will come in and bring food to people who need it. Well, in many of the areas they've been going into, it's been very dangerous because they're right on the front line with the Russians and they need a military escort. In any case, their military escort reached out to them and said, could we get some help raising some money to buy a used vehicle for them to be able to do their work? I've got a fundraiser up. We've raised several $100s. I'd like to raise more because they need around $4,000. I've got it set up on my TikTok in my, just go to my profile again, the Linktree link in my profile, click it. Very first entry is how we're raising the money. We're sending it to my friend Vlad's PayPal in Ukraine. Vlad actually works, he's a volunteer with the nonprofit, and Vlad has been Vlad's been who we're using for all of the humanitarian work we've been doing for the last 8 months now. I've raised almost $80,000 thanks to you guys doing humanitarian work. All of it's been basically through Vlad. So if you can help out, 100% of the money will go to the Ukrainians. I'm not taking a dime. We're not taking a dime. But if you guys can help out, a tractor take, exactly. If we can get them a tractor, that might be nice too. But no, we're trying to get them a 4x4. They've already found the vehicle. It's a used car, $4,000. So if you guys can help, I'd appreciate it. Go there. For you guys here, I will put it up and then I will get to your questions. Banner. That's Vlad's contact. So if you guys can contribute, I'd appreciate it. All right, let's dig in. Let me look right here for a question on TikTok. One moment here, guys. And like I said, comments are good too. I'm always interested in what you guys have to say because a lot of you I think know these topics better than I even do. Some of them. Is the chain of command in Russia able to contradict Putin's nuclear attack order? Good question. Several months ago, some people thought so. Okay. But now I had read something maybe about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, that there was concern that Putin has, so solidified power in Russia. He has turned it into such a dictatorship that it might be impossible for anyone to actually contradict him. if he gives the order. There is a bit of a chain of command. So it's not like Putin literally pushes a button and there's a launch, right? But the concern is because it's a dictatorship, he might actually get away with it if he were to say launch the missiles. Another one. Hearing the next big push could be Melitopol. Yeah. And then clearing the rest of Kherson. You think that's a smart move? I don't know if it's a smart move, but Melitopol is right over here on my map. Okay. You see? And we were saying Kherson. Now, I always forget if I'm going to guess, since the person said the rest of Kherson, that Melitopol is in Kherson. It's, there's two reasons here. There's Melitopol and there's Zaporizhia. I never quite know where it is. Let's say it's part of Kherson. It's going to be on the outskirts of Kherson here. Kherson goes all the way over here. The fighting so far has been up here, where the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians out south of the water. Now, I was telling you, the Russians are digging in along Crimea down here, which means the Russians are afraid the Ukrainians may actually kick the Russians out of this area entirely. So who knows? I mean, I think we don't really know next where the Ukrainians are going to go. I would say they have been very smart to date, the Ukrainians have, in terms of being able to pick regions and locations, geography, and the time of the battle that has been smartest at really catching the Russians off their guard. Remember how early on, I'd say a couple months ago, the Ukrainians convinced the Russians, and we were all talking about it. We were all talking about the big Kherson counteroffensive, which actually is going on now. But the Ukrainians convinced the Russians it was going to take place like July, August or so. Even we talked about it, that it was going to be August or so. So what did the Russians do? The Russians took a ton of their troops that were fighting up here and they moved them all down here because they were afraid of the big Russian counteroffensives. So what Ukrainian counteroffensive? So what did the Ukrainians do? As soon as the Russians moved a bunch of their troops from here to here, the Ukrainians attacked here. And that's where the Ukrainians had that massive success about 2 or 2.5 months ago, is right after they convinced the Russians to move their troops halfway across the country. So, it's hard to know. I will just say, I don't know what's smartest for the Ukrainians to do next, to be honest. I will just say they've been very good at picking the right place at the right time and at fooling the Russians. So the Russians aren't really sure of what's coming next, which is great, really great. Let me see. Kelly Fonts is, bring up something from the Kyiv Independent. Kelly is saying from the Kyiv Independent. Oh, thank you, Agix. I'm going to call you for the hot dog. I don't think I've seen that one before. Thank you, Franktastic. That's cute. That's somebody that was cute. Some Russian troll. Thank you, Jen B. I'd much rather talk about the whale Jen B just gave me than the Russian troll. Anyway, we'll give the wave. Thank you, Jen B. That was very nice of you. Some Russian troll tried to put up some smear, but again, it cracks me up because it's the way the Russians do these things. They're constantly doing things that don't really work in English, and they're translating. So this person was basically accusing me of cuckold or something, which is a concept that we never use. It's funny. It's a word out of Shakespeare. It's a concept we don't ever even use in America. Cuckolding, it's just not. And this person was like, "Your wife is sleeping with your neighbor," and it's like, what? What does that even mean? But I just Google Translate. I just get such a kick out of that stuff. It just cracks me up. It absolutely cracks me up. I love that. Your wife is sleeping with your neighbor. Oh, no. What will I ever do? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Anyway, Kelly Fonts. Ukraine to produce weapons jointly. I did see this. I didn't mention the story because I wasn't sure of the significance. Ukraine to produce weapons jointly with at least 6 NATO countries to produce and develop heavy weapons, according to the Ukrainian Defense Company. I saw that, but I wasn't sure what the significance was of Ukraine producing weapons jointly with these NATO countries. I mean, I was sort of like, so what? I guess I'd want to know more. When I say, thank you, K9, for that. When I say so what, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying I'm not sure how that changes the situation right now. Does it somehow mean more weapons will be available? I just don't know, that'll provide more weapons in the long term versus what they can get now, a more steady supply of weapons. I don't know. And that's the only reason I didn't add it today, because I was afraid if I threw it in there, I would sort of tell you this right now. And I'd say, but I don't know what it means. I just don't know how significant it is militarily. So anyway, thank you, Kelly, for bringing it up. But as I said, I just don't know the strategic significance. Let's see. Capis is raising something about the Nord Stream pipeline explosions. Have you heard that this Nord Stream blowup may be an easy way for the Russian gas company to easily avoid penalties? Yes, to easily avoid penalties for not supplying gas according to agreements. Yes. So what Capis is saying is, one of the thoughts for why Russia, remember Russia, and by the way, you always know when Russia goes, why would we do something that crazy? You're like, oh, but you totally did, right? So Russia was saying, we're talking about those two pipelines that are natural gas pipelines from Russia to Europe. Thank you, Hector, from Russia to Europe. And somebody blew them up several months ago. And the Russians tried to blame America. It was all the Americans. Oh, no, they tried to blame America. They blamed Ukraine, and they blamed Poland because, they hate the Poles. And the Russians said, why would we do that? Well, it was postulated before that Russia cut off its natural gas via Nord Stream 1 in violation of its contract with Europe. Now, if you violate the contract, you're liable for monetary damages for breaking the contract. If someone blows up your pipeline, we don't know who, then it's not your fault that you're not shipping gas. Right? So the thought was Russia could have blown up the pipeline simply because they didn't want to pay the monetary damages, and it allowed them to go, if the issue ever goes to court, to go, gosh, judge, what could little old innocent Russia do? Someone blew up our pipeline, like a little Southern belle. Someone blew up my pipeline, right? So that was the idea. Yeah, I had heard that too, Capis, and it very well could be. It very well could be. So thoughts on the missile incident in Poland? Jacek is asking, you're talking too much. I mean, it's a Russian troll. That's another one. You're talking too much. Well, it's going to be kind of a quiet hour if I'm not talking, because the way this video works, you guys can't talk. So sorry. The thoughts on the Polish incident, the Ukrainians are now on the ground in Poland investigating. We're talking about I hope you like me talking, because literally there'd be nobody talking. There was a rocket that landed in Poland, killed 2 people. Initially, we all feared it was a Russian rocket. We weren't sure. And then NATO came out, Poland came out, America came out and said, it sure looks like it was a Ukrainian rocket, that it was basically an anti-air missile that the Ukrainians use in order to shoot down Russian missiles that are coming in. It may have missed. It may have somehow landed up in Poland. The Ukrainians were very adamant and said, no. Zelensky said there is no doubt that it is not, double negative, but there is no doubt that it is not a Ukrainian missile. He said it's not. So Biden then came out and said, well, that goes against the evidence. It got kind of me, little nasty. The Ukrainians are now part of the investigation, which is good. They're on the ground in Poland, which is good. Zelensky has said, look, we don't think this is us. We want to be a part of the investigation to see what evidence you're finding. And finally, they agreed to let the Ukrainians there. So we'll see. I still say it's interesting how adamant Zelensky is being about this, because, and I've said this before, there were multiple explosions, but witnesses, thank you, Al, for the paper crane. Witnesses originally said there were multiple explosions. But what does that mean? I mean, if a rocket explodes, and what if it throws material that blows up a lot of different buildings? Or I don't know, right? I mean, and somebody was raising, thank you. I don't know if Sarah, I'm going to go. Oh, S. Rasmussen. Thank you, S. Rasmussen, for the whale. Whale, waves, waves. Thank you. Thank you very much. You guys are being very sweet tonight. I appreciate it. We were talking about, somebody had brought up on YouTube, and it was a really good point, that it's possible, part of the reason there was such a big crater is because we know it was a grain silo or something dealing with grain that was hit. And apparently grain is very flammable, which makes sense. I'm assuming because of the fineness of the powder. I know anything that is powdered can be very flammable, very explosive. So, who knows as far as what the explosion was. I will just say that it is still curious. There is still, the other day I said 1%. Let me put it this way. There's still maybe 5% of me that is not sure. 95% of me goes, okay, it's probably Ukraine. But 5% of me says the Ukrainians are still being so adamant about this, and the Ukrainians have not lied. I mean, Zelensky has not lied to us once that I can think of in this war, right? He's been a very straight shooter with us, and it is in Zelensky's interest to be a straight shooter with us because we are helping provide the lifeline of weapons that and ammunition that Ukraine needs. And frankly, money, I say collectively, all of our countries, we are also providing financial aid that Ukraine needs to help keep the government afloat, to help pay workers, because those workers then help keep the economy afloat. Zelensky has a lot of reasons to be honest with us and no reason to be dishonest with us. So all I'm saying is it makes it interesting to me that Zelensky is so adamant that it wasn't a Ukrainian rocket, because it makes me wonder, what does Zelensky know that he's not telling us? I don't know. Let me do a quick reset, and then we're going to continue. I am John Aravosis. You're watching the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show here in Washington, D.C., where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. And please do follow me on TikTok. Subscribe over there. I did want to show you guys really quick. I've got new auction items. Where's my... Oh, I meant to bring it over, and I didn't. I was going to show you. I've got... All right, hold on a second. Hold on. I'm going to show you really quick. I was going to bring it over to show you, and I forgot. We've got in our... One of the cool things... I've got a Discord up, discord.aravosis.com. And one of the cool things we do with the Discord is I've been holding auctions of neat stuff that we've gotten from Ukraine. Half the money from the auction goes to support my work because I do this full time and no one is supporting my work. It's literally you guys. I mean, no one's paying me to do this. And half of the money goes to our Ukrainian humanitarian work. Well, the three things we've got up right now, which is very cool. One of them is a Ukrainian military. It's a Ukrainian border police badge. It's for a beret that goes in like the berets, literally the military hats. And it's the mark. It's brass. It's the mark of the border police. You will see with the Cossack cross, which is very neat. The second one, and we're going to get more of these, which I'm very glad, is from Azov. From the Azovstal plant that I was talking about earlier. Remember the plant in Mariupol that we were talking about where the 2,000 Russians, thank you, Mustard, speak of the devil. I'm trying to remember which, you got the shirt, I think. Thank you for that, by the way. I think Mustard was the one that got one of the shirts, I think. Or he kept getting outbid. I can't remember now, but thank you for that gift. What the Ukrainians did, they took the last shipment of steel from the plant where the 2,000 Ukrainians fought the 14,000 Russians, and they made these bracelets out of the remaining steel. And they initially made 10,000. They've got a few more, and then they're not going to make any more. But it's really cool. It's with the steel, and it's got, you can see it there with the Ukrainian trident in the middle. I don't know if you guys can tell. Might be a little hard to tell, but the Ukrainian trident. But it's a neat, so we're auctioning this off. And the final thing, which is my favorite, is these Zelensky shirts. And these are the military combat shirts that President Zelensky wears, and they're the really cool ones that have the Velcro. They're short sleeve. The brand is Combat, and they have Velcro on each side, and the Velcro lets you wear the military patches. Anyway, we've been auctioning those off too, and they've all been doing really well. It's been really neat. But sign up on the Discord because actually those three we're auctioning off simultaneously right now. I mean, each one separate, but they're being auctioned off right now. Two of them one in our VIP auction and two in the public. VIP meaning if you, the Discord's free, but if you pay, then one of the perks I give is we also have one of the auction areas that's only for paid members, because that way it keeps it to a smaller crowd and gives you more of a chance as a way of thanking you. But, there's the free stuff too. Anyway, let me continue with the questions. I just wanted to show you that because I love that. I love doing the auction because it's fun. And I like the fact that we can help Ukraine. I like the fact that it can help me, but I also enjoy because it's fun. It's fun getting the sort of sharing all the cool Ukrainian stuff. 1 second here. Oh, Rachel, I'm laughing. I remember that, Rachel. I'm not even going to repeat what Rachel wrote, but it makes me laugh. What have we got here? Let me see. Yes, I did wear I wore the nap. I do have Venmo. I've got my Venmo turned off right now only because I'm currently accepting donations on my page via my link tree, but the donations I'm taking right now via the link tree, I'm taking for a fundraiser we're doing to try to get a all-purpose, all-utility vehicle for Ukrainian troops. We need about $4,000. We're trying to help out some specific Ukrainian troops who also provide security for one of the charities that we basically foster, so to speak, in Ukraine that we've been raising money for. So I turned off my PayPal, I turned off my Venmo and my Cash App because I didn't want people giving me money and getting confused. So this way, I will have it on eventually for donations, but for right now, I've just got the Vlad's PayPal address in there for you guys to copy and use to give donations. So my Venmo's turned off right now is my point, because I didn't want to get confused between what was coming from me and what was coming from Vlad. But thank you for asking. We can talk about Twitter at the very end if you want. Let me pull up another question on TikTok here. One moment, guys. For anybody new on TikTok, this is the part of the show where we hang out and do questions and answers. I am John Aravosis. This is my Aravosis Report, where we talk about Ukraine every day, the latest news. Basically, I look at the news of the last 24 hours and try to tell you guys what I think matters and why. Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. So I'll be back Monday night again. But this is the part of the show where we then do question and answer and discuss. And I'm going through questions that people have submitted in the Q&A link on my TikTok profile. How do you feel about the possibility of chemical weapons being used when things get dire for Russia? We do know Putin has a bit of a thing for them. Yes, he does. That one gets interesting because, sip of water. We've talked a lot about Russia using nuclear weapons or a dirty bomb, which is basically a regular bomb that you put some nuclear material with it so that the bomb throws the nuclear material all over the place. And it's not a nuclear reaction, so it's not like it explodes massively, but it still throws nuclear material everywhere, which is really scary. And it's basically used, it causes a lot of radiation damage, but it is also used as a terror weapon, right? We have not heard a lot of talk about chemical or biological weapons, both of which Russia has. And as you said, Russia is also happy to use those. I will guarantee you from the American perspective, we have told Putin, not only will you not use nuclear weapons or a dirty bomb, you will not use biological or chemical weapons in Ukraine either. But I will say it worries me that we keep talking about we keep talking about nuclear, but we don't mention biological and chemical, because I worry that it almost makes it sound like we're less angry potentially at their use, right? And we don't want them to be used either. But again, I think I will guarantee you that the Biden administration and NATO have made clear to the Russians behind the scenes that if they use any of those, they're going to be just as sorry as had they used nuclear. So that's what I've got to say on that. KA. Oh, thank you, Kay. That was very generous of you. What do you think of it being Russian missiles and NATO not wanting to go to war over 2 people dying? So what Kay is saying is it possible, another sip of water. My friend Marianne calls that my strategic sip of water, but that was actually me being thirsty. I wasn't looking for a moment to think of an answer. That was me being thirsty. But it is a great trick, too. If you ever want to think a second, you take a sip of water while you're thinking. What Kay is saying is it possible that the reason Ukraine is so adamant that that missile, the rocket that hit Poland this week, was in fact a Russian rocket from Russia is because it was. And the only reason that that Poland, that NATO Secretary General, and that America keep saying it wasn't Russia is because they're trying to defuse the situation of what would otherwise be a possible Russian attack on NATO that could lead to war. You know, I don't think so. I mean, a couple reasons here. One, I think if it got out that they lied to us, that would not go over real well. You know what I mean? Meaning with the citizenry. I mean, we're all democracies. I don't think we'd be really happy if we knew our governments lied to us about a Russian attack. Second of all, making Ukraine look stupid isn't really very helpful either, because it undercuts Ukraine and potentially it makes people wonder, well, why is Zelensky saying this? Is he lying? I don't think so. Also, it's kind of it would take a conspiracy of a lot of countries to pull off. Like, now you would need Poland, you'd need America, right? You'd need, NATO Secretary General's on board. You're talking about staff and people in at least 3 different countries right there, right? He's Scandinavian, the NATO Secretary General. So I don't know. I just, when I first heard people say that, I was like, I mean, it's possible, but I still think one of the ways you would diffuse it is by saying, yes, it was a Russian missile and it was a mistake, and we accept the Russians' apology, right? But the fact that Russia isn't even apologizing, I don't know. In any case, it's still possible. It is possible. My gut is telling me I don't think so. But that and $5 will get you a Starbucks, my gut. Why are the Ukrainian HIMARS in Poland? I don't think there are. What do you mean? Had to be stolen? Older? I'm not sure what you mean, David. I'm not sure what you mean there, David. Beep, just looking here. There have been a few reports of explosions at an oil tank in Novorossiysk, which would mean very long-reach drones or careless smoking. Where is Novorossiysk? I was seeing in the last day there have been reports of things exploding in Russia again, but I haven't really reported on them because, we don't know. The Zaporizhia plant they've been going after again. There was more fire. It looks like the Russians yet again hit one of the buildings in the Zaporizhia plant. The Russians have a longer history of falsehoods. My government's not perfect, but the Russians have been far worse. All right, let me look again. It's in Russia. I assumed it's in Russia. I just wasn't sure where in Russia. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with the names. So by now, I think all of us know so many of the Ukrainian names that I figured it wasn't Ukraine. New long-range drone? Oh, there was a Ukrainian one, wasn't there? Was that the one that they were calling a shark or something? But we didn't hear anything about it since then. So I don't know, Rob. I don't know. Yeah, we haven't heard anything about it since then. That could have been 6 weeks ago even. Who lied about Iraq? George Bush. How do you feel about the possibility of chemical weapons? Oh, no, we did say that. Chemical weapons. Were there Russian POWs killed in Crimea? I doubt it was Crimea because Crimea is occupied by the Russians themselves. The Russians are claiming that some Russian prisoners of war were executed by Ukrainians. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen anything more on it. I just saw the report today that the Russians are claiming it. It should be investigated. I mean, that's all I can say. If the Ukrainians did it, they should be held accountable. But what I can tell you is the United Nations had investigated recently and published a report or put out a report actually a week ago. And what they found was they said the Russians have committed, an unprecedented number of war crimes in Ukraine. The Ukrainians did commit two Russian soldiers that were executed, and the UN documented it, but the UN added these were the only two war crimes we could find for the Ukrainians, were the two that we just mentioned. All of the rest were Russian. So it's always possible that this is another one. Again, it should be investigated if there's any proof of anything. But it should also be said that so far, Ukraine commits war crimes as a fringe thing that happens. Russia does it as federal government policy coming down from Putin himself, right? The Russian policy is to commit war crimes. America and Iraq, American Iraq thing gets more complicated. Bush lied to get us in there, but there's also a lot of lies about the number of civilian deaths and all of that. A lot of numbers that are just BS with regards to that everyone's supposed to quote and go, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to defend Iraq because Bush lied about it. So I'm not going to defend a war that the guy lied his way into. So don't think you're going to get me doing that. All right. You know what, guys? It is 7:00. I'm going to call it quits. Why don't we'll regroup on Monday. I'm going to be in Chicago at that point for the next 6 weeks, visiting Mom. I go back for Thanksgiving and then stay until New Year's because I bring my dog and it's just too expensive to go back and forth, from Chicago for like 2.5 weeks. So I go report from there with Mom's fabulous wood paneling. So you guys can all see me from there working. And, I will, anyway, I'll be back Monday. We can talk about Twitter briefly. But I'll be reporting from Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern. So please do show up there. Follow me on TikTok and, all the rest, YouTube and everything else. Actually, I'll do the quick recap. We like to do the recap as well of the stories where we just do a quick, boom, boom, boom of the stories we talked about today in case you guys missed any of them. So the stories are, President Zelensky said that Russia was seeking a short truce with Ukraine, a proposal that he rejected because it would simply allow Moscow forces to regroup. 91% of Ukrainians think the war should end only once Crimea is liberated. Russia raised hopes of making a prisoner swap with Brittany Griner and a Russian arms trafficker. The U.S. responded that Russia's proposal was not serious. Sweden confirmed that, in fact, there were 2 detonations that blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. It was sabotage. The Russians, according to a Ukrainian press account, the Russians fired a missile at Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, containing a dummy nuclear warhead. In other words, a fake nuclear warhead. No word on whether that was a mistake or the Russians playing head games. Quite possible. Russia is probably going to use some of the troops that it has now freed up in the Kherson province into eastern Ukraine, where they think the battle might be heating up in eastern Ukraine now. The Russians are digging fortifications in Crimea, Mariupol, and in eastern Ukraine in expectations that the Ukrainians may be able to make some more advances. European Union Foreign Policy Chief says that Russia is not ready for peace. Nearly half of Ukraine's energy grid has been knocked out by the Russians. And that's it. That's it for the news today. All right. We can talk about Twitter briefly because folks wanted to do a quick little Twitter. I don't want to do half an hour on Twitter like we did the other night. But Twitter's still here, but still a mess. The latest craziness with Elon Musk is, you guys know that Musk fired half of Twitter's staff. So there were about 7,500 people working for Twitter. Musk fired half of them. So there were about 3,700 left. Well, the other day, Tuesday or Wednesday, Musk sends out an all-staff email and says, the only way we're going to get Twitter 2.0, the new Twitter, the new Elon Musk Twitter, is by you all working extremely hardcore. And that's the phrase he used, extremely hardcore. People were saying it was like a frat boy or something. Extremely. And if you're not extremely hardcore, I don't want you. And what extremely hardcore means is you've got to work really long, bad hours. It's going to be really hard. He's going on about how bad the job is going to be. And mind you, half of your coworkers are gone, which means the people you've got left, you're having to do their job, right? And the boss sounds like he's kind of a jerk. So Musk, in this email, if you're not willing to be extremely hardcore, no. if you're willing to be extremely hardcore, click the button at the bottom of the page that says, yes, I will be extremely hardcore. And anybody who doesn't click the button will be fired as of 5 p.m. Thursday, which was yesterday. And you will get 3 months severance, 3 months pay, right, to pay you off. Well, last night hits. People from Twitter start leaking that none of their passes are working. Musk apparently locked down the building. He revoked everyone's pass to the building, to Twitter. They were locked out. Musk put out the word because there is no communications department anymore at Twitter. Musk fired them all. He doesn't believe in communications departments. They don't have one at Tesla. So there's no communications department. He locks down the building, says, I'm not opening it up. Oh, it must have been everywhere. Yeah, everywhere around the world. I'm not opening up any of our offices until Monday. Well, the staff reports that the reason is because he freaked out because so many people responded to Musk's email and said, fine, I quit. Like, for 3 months pay, I quit. No problem. That he freaked out. And they had no idea, because of the idiotic way Musk did it. They had no idea how many people quit. Correct. There's an estimate that as many as 88% of the company is now gone. So he locked everything down out of fear that the employees would come back to work and sabotage the company. But he also has no idea how many people have left. Well, then today, and again, the employees just keep leaking this stuff. Today, he sends out an all staff, email and says, oh God, I don't have this handy. If anybody among you thinks you're a good coder, like writing computer code, send me like 10 copies of your best code. No, it was two different things. Send me like 6 copies of your best code listing the 6 most important things it accomplished in the last 6 months, and bring me 10 copies of your best code to my office at 2 p.m. today, Friday, for some reason. Well, the reporter that this gets leaked to then says, but of course, all the offices are locked down. Nobody's badges work. So how does he put the message out to the entire staff and says, any of you who code, if you think you're a good coder, come by my office at 2. Well, I mean, he's not saying specific people show up. So it's not like he can have somebody turn their badges back on, because he didn't say, Joe and Susie, come to my office. I'm turning your badge on. He's an idiot. So that was the latest. And it was written in a way that yet again was obnoxious as hell. It was like, if you think you're an excellent coder, come to my office at 2:00. Well, mind you, but A, it's desperate. But what it also is passive aggressive, because if you don't come to his office at 2, if you don't prepare 10 examples of your code, if you don't write a long explanation of the 6 big things you did for the company, it means you're acknowledging you're not an excellent coder, right? If you don't show up, then it means you're admitting you're not an excellent coder, and he's going to fire you. So I swear to God, I wrote a quick thing on Twitter last night, and I was like, Twitter folks, I worked at the United Nations. I had a boss who was a bully. I mean, an absolute bully. I forgot what else I said about, but I mean, a bully beyond belief. Just horrific harasser this woman was. And I said, I made the mistake, and I knew it before I took the job because I had met her. Horrific human being. And I came to work. I took the job anyway, and I knew she was a bully, and she bullied and harassed me and harassed the entire staff. And I wished to God I hadn't taken that job. It was the worst job of my life. And I told them, the last thing you need to do is work for an abuser. The last thing you need to do, but I mean, these poor people. But again, what I love about it though is he sends the email, and the email is, first of all, like, only those of you who think you're excellent coders. But again, if you don't respond, then it means you don't think you're an excellent coder. So he's going to fire you anyway. And then I was reading another article explaining more details of who's left. One of the they were talking about all of these different critical offices in Twitter and how like one of the critical offices, thank you official bro, one of the critical offices typically has 20 people, now it has nobody. Another one has like a certain number and several of them quit. It was like all of these different top jobs that don't exist. Oh, it's not clear that the head of human resources quit. It's not clear if there's anybody in human resources. It's not queer. It is queer. It's not clear if the person who like figures out how to pay you is still there, right? The staff. Oh, and the staff who quit last night at 5:00, who refused to sign his extremely hardcore email. They said there was no, like they were quitting by not clicking the button, but there was no one for them to actually contact to quit. He said there was no one for us to call. So what they did was they said all we could do was sign ourselves out of everything and be like, okay. Now I'm trying to think, hang on. Somebody just mentioned all the engineering folks quitting. And yes, there was one I don't think I've got this handy here. Shoot. I retweeted it earlier today. I retweeted it, which is ironic, but I did. Hang on. I believe it was, you are correct about the engineering staff quitting, and it was a horrific number. It was something like, hang on, see if she's got it here. No. Oh, there's another one. Oh, so listen to this. Email from Elon to the engineering team today. Anyone who can actually write software, again, right? The obnoxious way. Anyone who can actually write software, please report to the 10th floor at 2 p.m. today. Before doing so, please, mind you, he sends this to you in the morning. Before doing so, please email me a bullet point summary of what your code commits have achieved in the past 6 months. Elon is also asking for up to 10 screenshots of the most salient lines of code from Twitter engineers. Again, no context as to what this is about. We know Twitter's engineering teams have been gutted by layoffs and resignations. What's next? Yesterday, Twitter told employees the offices were closed and badge access was suspended until Monday. Employees are extremely confused. They're talking to this reporter going, how do we get in? Then, no, she writes a couple hours ago, no. In an email for remote Twitter engineers, Elon Musk says he wants to speak to people on video. Only those who cannot physically get to Twitter headquarters are excused. But if possible, I would encourage you to fly to San Francisco to be present in person. He'll be at the office until midnight. Can you imagine? He's not offering to pay. I love this. If possible, I would encourage you to fly to San Francisco to be present in person. I'll be there until midnight. I would be like, dude, and I don't work for you anymore. Are you out of your mind? He's destroying that place. But yeah, the one thing I read was one guy's team of engineers had, oh, this is the fake person again. Yeah, that's the fake person again. One guy's team of engineers, I'm grabbing a copy of that, said he had 75 members of his engineering team. 3 didn't quit. So 72 of his 75 engineers on his team have quit. Now, I mean, I hate to laugh because I love Twitter. I mean, Twitter has been incredibly helpful for me gathering information about Ukraine. I've used it for other issues I've worked on. It's really useful for people who like to get little bits of information like I do. It's what spies do, but it's also what smart political people do, where I always say reading the tea leaves. You look at all the little minutia of information going, it's what good economists do. I mean, a lot of people in a lot of different industries do. You look at all the little bits of information from all over the place and you try to pull it together into a picture. And like, I'll do it with Biden, right? Where I look at all the different things Biden does and I try to get a sense of what I think Biden's thinking and what he's doing. Same thing with Russia, same thing with, Ukraine, everything else. It's been super helpful. So I hate to see it go. What is unfortunate is Elon Musk has destroyed Twitter already. Elon Musk has already said he can't stand Twitter's power users, who are the people who use it the most, who are people like me. He hates us. He hates us all. And I'm just not going to pay money to somebody who hates me. I just can't. There's no way. There's no way. So, it's unfortunate. The only thing I can't figure out about him doing it on purpose, Dahlia, is he paid $44 billion for the thing with a B, right? I mean, all I can guess is, okay, he wants to fire all the staff because he thinks they're useless. Good luck, right? I mean, maybe there's a lot of useless staff, but not 88% of them. And when you fire 88% of the staff, you've lost a lot of people who know what's going on in that building, right? A lot of people. I mean, just the passwords to different systems are gone, right? I mean, just crazy. Yeah, anyways, it's a mess. It's a mess. It makes me sad because I really love Twitter. But at this point, I hate to say I'd be happy to see it go because I would not be happy to see it go, but for it just to take him down with it, but it is unfortunate. No, it's really important. And it's been important in a lot of countries around the world, developing countries and other countries, for pro-democracy. I mean, look at how much we've been getting information from Iran and how, the videos we're looking at and everything else, Oh, thank you, Elise. I know that was sad, but so yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. Oh, well, anyway, oh man. Yeah, I just don't know what the jerk's doing, but I know the Elon fanboys. I doubt you'll be getting rid of them anytime soon. I finally deleted my DMs. I found a way to do it, but dear Lord, I'm sure they're still on his system. He's going to be blackmailing everybody. I heard about him not having the degree, but I didn't see what the source was in that. So I wasn't sure if that was really true or not. I just can't see him destroying it after paying $44 billion. It doesn't make sense. Honestly, I think he's an egomaniac. He's a megalomaniac. He's a narcissist. I think he's a little woo-woo, and it's not just his Asperger's. I think he's a little woo-woo, so there's a little Kanye going on. It was funny. My nephew had said, you're dealing with somebody with Asperger. In his case, he thinks the Asperger's things is the problem, but he said somebody who's not very good at social interactions, who decided to buy a social interaction platform, and he's having social interactions with all of us and all the advertisers on the platform because like Donald Trump, he can't shut up. But at the same time, he doesn't have a communications department anymore. So he's literally saying publicly everything that's going to happen, and it's blowing up in his face. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. And he's destroying the reputation of his other companies now too, because Elon is becoming Trump. And a lot of us are kind of looking at it now and going, you know what? I really did like Teslas. It makes me feel right now, if I had the money, it would make me feel like I think I'd be a little embarrassed buying a Tesla right now because people would be like, you bought a Tesla? Like, ugh. Anyway. All right, guys, I'm going to go. I'm going to make some pizza or something because I need to eat a little bit. I haven't eaten too much today and I'm hungry. Oh, man. Tired. All right. I am going to see you guys on Monday. All right. So have a good weekend. I'll be checking in. I will be in the Discord. I mean, I won't be hanging out at the Discord tonight, but I will be checking in on the Discord as I do. So make sure you check in there. And Thank you for joining, and thank you for all the gifts. You guys were crazy today. Thank you. That was, I mean, super generous on all the platforms, on TikTok and YouTube. You guys were amazing tonight. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And moderators, I did not witness it, but people were saying tonight was yet another crazy night with the trolls. Other than that lunatic who came back, the crazy guy came back with, I am from TikTok, and if you do not close up in 5 minutes, I will close you down. It's like, sure you will, Mary. So, well, that's okay. Rat attack. As long as you disagreeing is fine. Disagreeing amicably, I'm always happy. So, all right, guys, let's call it quits. All right. Goodbye, all of you guys. Thank you again.